Hi there. I'm Dale. I write the Women in Science column for Women You Should Know, and today we're going to look at some of my favorite books about women mathematicians. We're going to kind of do a different area of science and math and tech every week here, and just sharing some things from the Women in Science bookshelves behind me, and we're going to start from the start. So, back with the Greeks. A book you kind of want to have if you're okay with German or if you're okay with ancient Greek is this little Reclam edition, which is about the early Pythagoreans and the women who were kind of involved with the early Pythagorean geometers and mathematicians, and particularly Theano, and her role in that. And this is just a great book in that it has, like all Reclam books, it kind of has the original Greek sources on one side, German translation on the other, and you can find out literally everything that there is to know about that era in one little book. Hard to find, especially here in the States, but really worth it. Number two, something to have still in antiquity is there's a million billion books about Hypatia of Alexandria and all the different theories about what went on with her life. It's one of those ones where there is the ratio of source material to material written about her is ridiculous. But one of the ones I like is Hypatia of Alexandria, Mathematician and Martyr, by Michael Deacon. You can kind of tell from the title sort of what the perspective of the book is. But it's nice in that it also, at the end, has all of the different sources that mention Hypatia in the first few hundred years after her death. So if you want to find out about her, you can either read what he has to say or go back to the original sources. And I appreciate it when books, especially on antiquity, do that for you. It's kind of neat. Moving ahead a few years, few centuries, once you get the death of Hypatia and then the sort of loss of that classical antiquity, there are other mathematicians, people who did a few things. There are some women in the Islamic tradition who actually contributed to the theory of algebra. There aren't full books written about them, so it's hard until you get basically to the 18th century, where you get people writing full books again. And one of them, whose title I hate, but the book I love, is Seduced by Logic, which is, it's unfortunate, but it's a dual biography of Emily de Châtelet and Mary Somerville. And Châtelet was the woman who brought Newton to France. You know, she and Voltaire were best pals and a little bit more than that. And she translated Newton and did the commentaries on Newton, which made Newton accessible to French mathematicians. And then Mary Somerville went the other way around, where when English mathematics was stagnating in the 19th century, she went and brought the mathematics of the continent and of France over to England and sort of reignited things there, and was one of the first really mega popular science authors who, you know, wrote over a broad base of subjects. And Seduced by Logic, this book kind of covers both of them and their respective contributions. So it's a great 2-for-1 kind of book to have in your collection. Still in the 18th century, you've got Sofia Germain, and the main writer about her is Dora Musilac. Probably butchered the pronunciation. These are words I only see on the pages. But she's written a novelization of Sophia Germain's life, and then a full-on biography, Prime Mystery, The Life and Mathematics of Sophia Germain. And it's really cool. Because it doesn't shy away from actually kind of going into some depth about what the math is. It's not covered in equations so much, but it does kind of, if you're interested in, well, what math did she do? And as you go into the 18th and 19th centuries, the mathematics gets more and more complex to explain in kind of lay terms. And Musilak does a good job of getting you the idea of mainly the mathematics that she's doing without you having to have a lot of, background in advanced mathematics to understand it. And also just telling you the background of her crazy life in the revolution, and then trying to basically bluff her way into people recognizing her mathematical skills because she was a woman and they wouldn't, and eventually finding actual recognition, being one of the first women to get full recognition for her mathematical skills. So it's a great book for all that stuff. Sophia Kovalevskaya is one of the, if you know the history of mathematics, and especially the history of women mathematicians, Sofia Kovalevskaya is kind of the big name to know of somebody who isn't Ada Lovelace, basically. And there's a bunch written about her. But my favorite is probably this old edition. It's called Sonia Kovalevsky, because her friends knew her as Sonia, and this is written by one of the people that knew her, A. Carlotta Loeffler. She knew her kind of a bit later on, and it's her writing about this person that she knew, and this was published in 1895 here, and understandably, just look at that penmanship, beautiful. Anyway, old books. It's light on the math. You're going to have to go other places to really understand the work that she did in differential equations. But it's much deeper in terms of the struggles that she was going through, the personal things that she had to go through to kind of get herself out of Russia and go someplace where she was allowed to learn as much math as she wanted, and just the various misfortunes that befell her, and then her career as a novelist as well. Because, Kovalevskaya is the most Russian thing ever. She's a mathematician and a novelist who dies tragically young after heartache. You couldn't get Russianer if you wanted to. So yeah, there's other books that are mathier, but in terms of just kind of getting to the source of Kovalevskaya as a person, yeah, it's hard to do much better. And you can also read Kovalevskaya's novels. They're in these, reprint versions, which are, probably the most unappealing way to read a novel in the history of humanity. It's just like, boy, when I read a novel, I want to read it in 3 tight columns that just go on in just these vertical skyscrapers on the page. But that's pretty much the only way you're going to get them, and you can get them, and they're not too expensive. So, give it a shot, and, she's also a really good writer. So check that out. Ada Lovelace. So much written about Ada Lovelace and her contributions to programming, writing essentially the first computer program. And it's tough to pick. There's not one that I really unambiguously love that I've read so far. I haven't read all of them. But, if I could kind of mix two together, the classic one for a while was Ada, the Enchantress of Numbers by Toole. It's got lots and lots of letters written by Ada and those around her. So it's a good source for all of those notes and letters for people who are just trying to get in and learn it from the ground level. So that's kind of nice. Some of the conclusions people have trouble with, but it has a lot of good sources in it. If you're looking for something more modern, Ada's algorithm is all over the place. How Lord Byron's daughter, Ada Lovelace, launched the digital age. As I recall reading this book a while ago, it spends a lot of time talking about people that aren't Ada. Like anytime that there's a chance, you get this a lot in biographies of women scientists, is any time that there's a chance to talk about somebody who's not the main person, you take it so that you can kind of pad out the thin level of materials that you have, because a lot of women didn't leave behind lots of documents about what they did, and other people didn't write about them. So it's a little bit thin on the ground. So you take any chance to write about other people, and this one does that quite a bit, as I recall. But it's there, and it's something you can order without having to go to like a used bookshop to find it. So that's good. Emmy Noether, one of the most important mathematicians of all time, certainly one of the most famous women mathematicians, but contributions are massive. In the early 20th century, tragic end to an incredibly promising career. Her work on conservation theorems and what kind of links all the different conservation theorems together is fundamental. And I love this book, Emmy Noether's Wonderful Theorem, by Neuenschwander, for several reasons. One, because at least my copy, the cover is this way, but the book is this way. So you kind of are constantly getting like you're entering this alternate dimension, like you're entering into a secret world just on that. It's got a lot on Emmy Noether's biography, but it's real heavy on the math of what was her work. So if you've got a fair amount of differential equations and a fair amount of physics behind you, you can make your way through it. I'd say if you're kind of an advanced undergraduate in physics or mathematics, you can make your way through it without much problem. If you're just somebody who's generally interested, it's probably a bit much, but even then you can still kind of read the little biographical sniblets in here that are also pretty good. But in terms of a book which is not afraid to actually go into the math of her work, it's one of my favorite things. So worth a pickup. It used to be pretty hard to find and expensive when you could, but that was like 8 years ago. So who knows? Julia Robinson is another one of the kind of big figures in mathematics in the 20th century. Her work contributed to Hilbert's 10th theorem, so Hilbert's 10th problem rather. So one of the really important figures. The book that I have, Julia Robinson, A Life, there was a film about her, but it's called A Life in Mathematics, I think. I think it's by Constance Reed. The problem is that I think it's, if the camera can pan over, it's somewhere over there. So I'm not going to show it to you because I don't know where it is. There's probably a bunch of books that I'm leaving out that I'm not talking about because they're over there. And that's somewhere under the Stormtrooper helmet. So but yeah, it's a cool book. And it's got some neat essays in the back by people who worked on the cracking of Hilbert's 10th problem, and kind of talking about their inspiration from Julia Robinson. So it's a neat book, it's worth a pickup. It's common and it's not too expensive, so it's a good one to have for 20th century important mathematicians. That's kind of what you got for individual figures. There are some other ones. Not necessarily my favorites, but there are some others. But those are some of my favorites on individual figures. But there's some that are general treatments about women in mathematics. I've got 3 here that are my favorites to just go through. Quick one, the classic, the one that kind of starts everybody off. Lynn Osen's Women in Mathematics. It's from the 70s, I think 73, 74. So it's the one that kind of started everything. It's got all of your favorites. Oh, no, I shouldn't anyway. So it's got Hypatia, it's got Sofia Germain, it's got Mary Somerville, it's got all of your favorites in just one place, with nice little essays, kind of like the Bell volume, Men of Mathematics, that classic history of mathematicians. It's kind of the equivalent of that, where you've got maybe 6 or 7 pages on 10 or so of your favorite mathematicians. That looks like Carolyn Herschel on the cover. Should be more astronomy. Anyway, then if you want something that's a little bit more outside the beaten path, I like Claudia Henrien's book, Women in Mathematics, same title, but this one's called The Addition of Difference. And it's, what I like about it is it's more kind of like modern women mathematicians, people who are doing things right now. So for instance, you've got Fan Chung in there, who's doing really important work in combinatorics right now. Karen Uhlenbeck, who was just honored recently, also has it in here. So I go to this book quite a bit when I'm trying to think of new mathematicians to cover. And then, finally, my favorite type of book in the entire world, biobibliographic source books. I love them. They have, just because it's my favorite things, bibliographies. I love bibliographies. If I could just sit in a room and read bibliographies and make little notes about cool things in bibliographies all day, that's what I would do with my life. So this has a lot of your standard figures. It's still, you've got Agnesi. I didn't even talk about Agnesi. She's over there too. I don't like that book much anyway, though, so don't worry about it. So I was looking through this now and realizing all this stuff I haven't, books that I kind of like, but anyway. But yeah, it's got biographical material and then just fat bibliographic material about each individual figure. And if you're that sort of person, this book is just butter on toast. So yeah, check it out. Louise S. Grinstein and Paul J. Campbell are the editors on it. And if you had to get kind of a classic book, you get that one. And then if you want one that gets real deep, you get that one. And then if you want to do modern stuff, you get that one. And then you're pretty good to go. So that's some stuff. We'll talk next time about something different, but there's some math to get you going. See you next time.